Thank you.
It's just a basic presentation where we wanted to cover some of the things that you want to consider whenever you sign any sort of agreement. So we hope some of that sticks with you. And the first point that we wanted to get across is that when you're developing the game with other people, very often you would agree that nobody gets paid, but everybody shares profit later on. And we feel that it's important not to mistake profit sharing and ownership, because a lot of people say, you know, there's 5 of us, each of us will have 20% of the company. But, you know, 5 years from then, you could regret that decision, or maybe, you know, you could make a different decision.
Yeah. So the key here is if you start with your business, if you start meeting with your friends and develop the idea of setting up a games company and develop a great game, think about the future. Think about, it's better now, think about the future, think about your contract you have with your fellows, go to a lawyer and ask him for advice in case someone wants to leave the company, in case someone wants to join the company. What happens if the company shall be sold somewhere in the future, or if you want to acquire another company? To go to a lawyer, have a good, very good shareholder agreement in place that can save a lot of money, time, and pain in the future.
But this is not obvious, of course, because when you start, normally you don't have anything. So, yeah. But at the same time, this is the point where it's the easiest to reach an agreement, because you're just starting, and you know you can go any way you want. And once you've made some money, once you've invested a few years, then it's difficult. Then you're starting to negotiate what is the value of the company, how do you see it, how do I see it, and so on. And the typical case is when, let's say, 5 people start the company and 2 of them are producer and designer, and then let's say a composer and a web guy and a support guy. And when they start, they all pull together, but after 10 years, maybe the producer and the designer, they're crucial, and the other guys, they're just doing their job. And so the ideal situation would be that these 2 guys who are fully committed, they would say, it's going to be our studio, and the other 3 guys still get profit share, but not the shares in the company. Because to be a partner of someone as your co-owner, that's much higher commitment than just to work with that person together.
Exactly, and you really need to be dedicated to the company. So rule number 1 is choose your shareholders carefully.
The second thing is, it's like the very basic thing that you have to remember even when you do a small agreement, is that any contract you make should have a termination clause. Because you know people get married, people get divorced, and projects get signed, projects get terminated. The worst case that I saw was a contract without any termination that gave away the rights for 50 years after the death of the developer. It's very hard to, you know, get out of that.
And you should know that depending on the jurisdiction, so the applicable law to the contract, some contracts can be terminated even without a termination clause. But in some jurisdictions, if there is no termination clause, there is nearly no termination possible of the contract, even if the other party is in breach of the contract. Which means if the other party, for example, does not pay any money or any royalty fees or whatever, or in particular, if during the project milestones payment are not provided.
So that's for example, imagine that he is paying me the money, I'm developing the game, and we put on paper that he's going to pay me $1 million and I'm going to deliver the game. And he paid me only half. And there's no termination clause in the contract. So what can I do? I have to go to court, I have to explain that, you know, it's not working out, it's going to take me 6 months. If there is a termination clause, then I'll say something like, and if he doesn't deliver his $1 million, then I can walk out. And then I can walk out in a few days after I send you the note and say that you haven't paid and I should walk out. Like, you should secure your freedom. You should always identify the things that you will not accept in any case, and if they happen, then you should put in the contract the clause that you can terminate, you can go out, you can do whatever you want.
And you know, in my experience, at the very beginning of a project or during the negotiations, everyone loves each other. It's one big family, they share one vision, everyone's happy. But the truth is, after a couple of months, when the money flows or if there's a certain delay in development, the family is not so close anymore. So consider this like this possibility and discuss it very openly with your business partners and with your publishers. So be honest and think about the very bad scenarios. And there are no bad surprises for any party involved.
The next point is that whenever you're signing your game with a platform, or you're selling it to a publisher, or you're launching it on your own website, you should make sure that you actually own the rights to what you sell. So from a situation where you work with a freelancer and the freelancer delivered some work but it's not his, I don't know if you guys remember the story with Crimecraft in the States, when they commissioned the character, but the character was actually made based on a photograph of a famous singer, and the singer sued. So this happens all the time, that you may discover that the work that you accepted is actually stolen, and you have to make sure that you protect yourself in this case. And to the case where with one of my friends, where he's making a game together with another guy, and that guy has a daytime job. And so he's developing his game on the equipment and in the office of another company. And then the problem is not that this guy will get aggressive and he will claim his share, but that his company may say, you know what, we own half of your game because it was done on our equipment, and according to the contract with this programmer, we own all the source code.
Yeah, for example, in Germany, there's a rule, if you use freelancers for a certain project, then only certain rights are transferred to this project, and the other rights, for example, pertaining to certain platforms, remain with the freelancer if you don't have another agreement. So which means if you hire a freelancer for a certain project for a iOS platform, for example, you cannot use his IP for Xbox One without a certain agreement.
And a typical illustration would be that you commission the game, the music for your game, and you launch it on one platform, and then you want to go to a different platform, and the author of the music may come and say, you know what, I only sold it to you to use on Xbox, and you have to pay me more to use it on every different platform. We have to speed up a bit. So reporting and payment clauses should be enforceable. How would you comment that?
We saw in several cases that the payment clauses and reporting clauses are not clear. It is not clear how the report should look like, how often reports should be reported or revenues should be reported, when payments have to be provided. These clauses can make developers' life very hard because they rely on the money from the publisher, and the publisher can always say, well, this particular clause is not very clear here, so I'm not sure, I still already have to pay the money to you at this particular point of time. Maybe when the game is published, but not as a milestone payment. So in my practice, I saw it's really problematic, in particular for young studios, if they do not pay attention to these kind of clauses.
Well, for example, there was one case that we had together when a company said it will report monthly, and then in a different place in the contract it said, and they will pay royalties. But there was no mention of monthly payment of royalties, which led to the company saying, well, actually, we will pay you when the contract expires in 4 years. And we had to take it to court. And
it's still at court. It's still at court.
Yeah, it's a very funny position, but you know, this is what happens when you don't define it. The next point is that when you're selling the game, you're not really selling, you know, the whole thing. You have to define the product, and the product has a platform. If you don't define this, if you're not specific, then the other party may assume that this is for everything. And
or just for one platform, depending on which party you're acting for.
Depending on which side you're on,
Be very precise. It's similar to the IP issue we just mentioned. Be very precise. What kind of platform? What kind of operation system? Is it Windows 8, or is it still, does it still include Windows Vista? This could really be problematic, because we have another court matter where we're discussing this with the other party.
Next point is that right now in the modern industry, you're not really selling a finished product that's going to go out and die. You're selling something that you can then improve, develop, expand, release DLCs for this additional content. And you should cover it in whatever agreement you make, whether you make an agreement with your contributor and you say, I'll give you 10% revenue share in the game, and in any DLC that we will release, as long as you will work on it. And if you stop working, then this is where it stops. And the same thing with the publisher. You're launching it with the publisher. Does the publisher get the rights to your expansions on Steam or not? That should be defined. You should not drop this off the line.
And there is no law nowhere in the world which says if a prequel or a sequel is not mentioned in a contract, then the publisher has the right to publish it or not. There is no law. So it's always based on case-to-case basis and the party's original intention when they concluded this license agreement. And if the license agreement has been was concluded 4 years ago, no one remembers the party's intention. So this is a problem that no one can really solve on a legal basis.
Well, this is like when you're sick, you're very interested in something, and when you're not, you don't care. So when you will have trouble, and when your game is successful, and you're talking about a significant amount of money on the table, then suddenly you remember, you like look up the contract. What did we put for law? Like, where do we go to court? And a lot of people copy Stockholm or London or Zurich. New York is my favorite. And actually, can you afford it? Like, can you really afford to go to London to an arbitration? Before you put something, before you copy something from a contract of your friend, you should think about the actual costs and find someone who did it before.
For example, if you go to court in UK, you will pay £500 per hour for your solicitor who will take over in court, this matter to court. But you don't only have a solicitor, you have a normal lawyer as well, which is called barrister. So you pay 2 lawyers £500 per hour each.
I don't know if they're really good, but I remember.
But depends on the money you want to have.
But I can tell you that we had once a legal problem in the UK with an indie studio, and the selection of the lawyer in the UK took us, I don't know, months. Because they were great lawyers, and they were all, like you say, hundreds of pounds per hour. And the studio was not really, didn't have the budget. And so we ended up finding a lawyer who was not in the games industry, who was a one-person show, who was a friend of a friend of a friend, who agreed that for £1,000 he will draft the letter. And when the developer saw the letter and paid £1,000, he was like, oh my God, this is like, this is expensive. But everything was settled with just one letter. But if he would go to court.
So maybe as a rule for you, the courts on continental Europe are much cheaper than the courts in the US or in the UK. And another very important rule is choose always the same law and the same place of jurisdiction. For example, if you want to choose Dutch law, place of jurisdiction should be in the Netherlands. If you choose German law, place of jurisdiction should be somewhere in Germany. Because if you have applicable law in country A and a court of jurisdiction in country B, you need 2 lawyers again. One for the civil court law and one for the real law. You don't want to do this. Always stay to the same country. And if you stay in continental Europe, it's usually cheaper than in the US or in England.
Next point is that if your game is successful, and I mean, you launch the game, you never know. But very rarely you know that this is the hit that you're launching. And some games continue to sell, and some games just die. And for the games that continue to sell, very often the teams, they look back 10 years after the launch, and they think how stupid we've been or how smart we've been that we sold all the rights for 10 years or for 5 years or for 15. So you should always keep in mind that whatever you sign, it should be limited within 3 years, 4 years, because that's the horizon of the current industry. Nobody knows what's going to happen. And if you will make a VR version of the game in 3 years, you also have the freedom to do so.
Yeah. I think there's nothing to add from my side. Yeah, another issue that is always subject to discussions is the precise definition of revenue share, of gross revenue, what are receipts, what are the detailed reports. So always be very precise and discuss this in very detail with your business partner, and write it down to the contract so that every party involved exactly knows and has no excuses. What are you talking about? Because otherwise, you have gross revenue, but then marketing spendings have to be deducted, logistics spendings, third-party marketing spendings, and so on and so on. And it's a big mess. And again, here is no law worldwide that can help you out here. It's really hard at court to fight for this or against this.
Even with your development partners, let's say you define that you give your art director a 20% revenue share in profit. What is profit? When you think profit is after you've paid all the costs and covered the rent of the office and covered the GDC trip, this is the profit. And the artist, he may think that profit is what's coming in from Steam. And then, why should the office costs be deducted? So nobody really has any golden rule for what each word means, and you should generally define it before you start. And the final thing is that all the games have bugs, and you may accidentally release a faulty game, and something will not work, and something will go wrong, and maybe your partners will invest considerable money in marketing budget of the launch of the game, and the game backfires or is delisted from the platform. And you should think about your liability. Yeah,
because every bug is a warranty claim, in fact. So in theory, you have to deliver a 100% perfect game without any bugs. That's in Germany, the law, actually. That's what the German Federal High Court said. So no bugs at all in any kind of software. We all know that's not possible. Every software, every game has bugs and needs to be updated and upgraded and patched and so on and so on. But if you agree upfront with your publisher about the time you need to remedy any bugs, or you can update things, then the warranty claims the publisher has against you don't hit you that hard, because on many jurisdictions you have 2 tries to fix a bug, and then in theory the publisher could even terminate the agreement and can claim a damage compensation, which is of course not very nice for each party involved.
Because if you launch the game and you support the servers and you support the ecosystem of the game, there should be some point where you can terminate this. And if, let's say, the number of players goes below certain number, then you should ideally have the opportunity to go out and to say, okay, we're killing it. Otherwise, you'll be tied to all the previous launches and continue to update and to respond, and that can drain the energy. If you have any questions, we can take them now.
You made it in time, Sergei. I'm surprised.
Yes.
Good. I'm proud of us.
That's good. Time is money.
Question? Yeah.
Yeah. Questions.
So let's assume like 2 scenarios. Like I'm a developer and I'm working with a publisher. And one scenario is like I have like an older game where it's my game and they just published it and it's like that marketing type of publishing. And then there's the scenario where I made a game with I have a publisher, but it's not my IP, it's their IP, but it's my game. So the contract says that it's gonna terminate in 2 years. So let's say the contract expired. So for the first case, can I just tell the publisher, okay, I'm gonna launch it myself on iOS from now on, so I don't need you, I don't want to pay you any more royalties? And for the second case, can they just take it on their own if it's their IP?
I think it's a very specific case. You need to look at the contracts and at the agreements.
So it always depends what you're agreeing in the contract. If you say termination means the publisher is not allowed to use the game anymore, then of course the publisher has no right to publish the game.
If you don't have anything like that? But
Then it depends on the applicable law, what the applicable law says. Under which law is the contract?
UK.
UK law. Okay.
So it's like a publisher that deals with many other developers and some other developers.
Just a few rows behind you is a great specialist in the UK law.
Yeah.
Paul Gardner.
Yeah. 500 pounds, huh, Paul?
So if you have 500 pounds,
Yeah.
you can. Yeah.
No, I'm sure, but I'm sure that we can discuss this after this year with Paul's help.
Is there anything like ethical stuff about this, or is it just laws? I mean, other developers just when the contract expires, they publish it on their name.
I mean, every case is specific. It depends on what your contract says, and it depends on your business relationship. Because what you're talking, I think what you're touching is a business development and legal, and they go together. And some things may be legal, but not ethical for business development community, and some things may be the other ways. So I think it's a case by case. It's like, you know, if I have a headache, should I take a white pill or the red pill? I don't know. Maybe you take the red and you die. So you have to look at the contract. Do we have one more question?
Hi, you mentioned that we should be specific about prequels, sequels, DLC, etc. And then there was a reference to remakes, etc. Would you be specific about what should or could be done? So, for example, I only license you to use this version,
yeah.
Or would you go into the trouble of trying to guess what's going to happen and include, you know, future versions and virtual reality?
If I was you, I would always say this includes sequels, but not prequels, for example. It includes relaunches and so on. So I would be as specific as possible. And you know, when the publisher starts discussing, you can say, you can always say, well, you can have all rights, but that's question how much money you pay for this.
It's always a question of what the publisher is willing to add to the deal if you add something. Let's say you're giving me a PC version and I want Mac version. So your question would be, if I don't deliver a Mac version, how much money you will take out from the contract? And if I deliver a Mac version, how much you're willing to add? And the default position of any publisher is I want everything. I want Windows 8, I want Android, I want everything. But then you ask me, you know, so how much money are you willing to pay for Androids? And I'll say nothing, you know, because that's not my primary market. And normally you make all the estimates based on some core markets that you know, that you control, that you sort of can estimate the revenue from. And then the rest is a bonus. So be very specific about, you know, why they want this and that.
Under the European law, you have an automatic IP right. So if you start creating IP, it usually belongs to you, unless you don't have another agreement in place. But if you start developing a game without any publisher involved, then it becomes automatically your IP. It's like a painter who draws a picture and then he owns the picture.
Generally, it's a good idea to say that whatever is not assigned is remaining with you. And just so everybody understands. So if a business development person on the other side changes and a new guy comes in 3 years later on, then he can understand that you've discussed this and this is what you've agreed to. Because a lot of contracts, you know, with time, when you work with companies, people change. So very often I was in situations where I would come in and look at the old contracts and would just call someone and say, where is this and this? And they go, but we agreed.
It's always the same story, actually.
Everybody has like this little black notebook and then they open like, no, I don't know. I don't know what we discussed. Yeah. Okay. So this is it, or last question? Okay.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't know anything about law really, and I was just quite curious. So I'm actually allowed to say that a contract I make can be applicable in any country, even though I don't have any affiliation with it at all?
Yes and no. So in general, you can choose the applicable law, but there are always local laws that will apply in any case. For example, if you choose American law, in America you can have certain kind of penalties. You could claim. You remember all these McDonald's cases where people McDonald's had to pay, I don't know, $10 billion because someone burned skin with a coffee. So these are special penalties, and such penalties are not enforceable in Germany. So even if you agree on US law and you have to pay a certain amount under the US law, the German law says, okay, that's all fine, but these kind of penalties are not enforceable in Germany. So there are certain, in every jurisdiction worldwide, there are certain laws that remain independent from the applicable law.
And I think this is a good point, that you need to work with the local lawyer. If you're based in the UK, then with the UK lawyer. If you're German, in Sweden, Swedish, to understand what the law says in addition to your contract. And I know a lot of developers who think that the contract is the final piece of paper that is the total set of terms that will apply to your situation. But this is not the case. It will apply in addition to the law of the country. And right now we have a little deal in Sweden, little case, where the contract is based on American law, but it's being contested in Sweden, and a lot of things are just thrown out. Because, yeah, it makes sense in America, but we're not in America. Boom, 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 and half of the contract remains.
Okay, thank you so much for a great presentation.
Yeah, thank you.